Hi, everyone, and welcome to Trans Youth Stories. This is a conversation that's co-presented by Lambda Legal and GLSEN, and it's an opportunity for us to have a conversation with three very impressive and inspiring transgender and non-binary young people. And the hope that we have for this conversation is that through hearing these three young people's stories, that other transgender or non-binary or gender non-conforming youth who have or perhaps will be going through some of the same experiences in the future can be empowered, can know that they're not alone, can learn that they can stand up for themselves, and also can learn that if they do need help, there is help out there for them. We're also hoping to educate parents, teachers, community members generally about the issues that these youth face. My name is Demoya Gordon. I am an attorney at Lambda Legal, and I use she, her, and hers pronouns. I want to start by asking our participants to introduce themselves. We'll proceed alphabetically just to make it easier logistically. So I'm joined by Emery, Kyle, and Mars, and I'm going to ask them to go in that order and introduce themselves. Emery, we'll start with you. So if you could just state your age, the state you live in, the pronouns you use, and if you want to share something else about yourself just to give us a sense of who you are as a person, whether it's a passion or a hobby or any career aspirations you have or anything like that that you wish to share, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so my name is Emery, and I live in Denver, Colorado. I am 15 years old, and I'm a sophomore in high school, and I consider myself to be a spoken word poet and a local activist.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. So we'll shift to Kyle.
Hi everyone, I'm Kyle. I use he, him, his. I am from Minnesota, and I really like rocks. I collect them, they're my passion, and I really like being involved in the queer community.
Awesome. Welcome, Kyle. And we will shift to Mars.
Hi, I'm Mars. I'm 16 and I'm a senior. I live in Berrien, Georgia. That's my county. I live in Berrien, Georgia. And I make music. And I'm a writer.
Fantastic. All right. So now that we have introductions out of the way, I thought I would start by asking each of you to share a little bit about what the, for want of a better term, transition or coming into yourself or coming out process has been like. So if you could talk a little bit about how you came to self-realization and perhaps talk a little bit about who the first person was that you talked to about your identity and how that experience went for you, and anything else to kind of contextualize how you came to realize who you are and to start living as your authentic selves. So again, we'll start with Emery.
Yeah, so my sort of like transition process and how I realized that I was transgender was, like other people, I guess, sort of started off a bit rocky. My, coming to know of like who I am didn't start off, too smooth. Because, I always sort of had this like hint that I was different, like, from when I was like 4 years old, like, I always wanted to be like one of the boys, and I like ran around and I played like a bunch of like stereotypically boyish activities and stuff like that, and it was really confusing to me to be labeled as a girl in society, and that particularly got more just confusing as I started to hit puberty and go into like my teenage years. And I feel like, especially once I hit middle school, that's when I really started piecing things together. I first heard like the word transgender when I was like online somewhere. And at first it didn't really click. It was more of like, I realized that this was something that I could be, but I didn't really try to accept it or anything, because like truth be told, like the only sort of representation that I got of transgender people was very like bad. Like I saw a lot of transgender people sort of ostracized in the media and really stigmatized. And whenever people talked about trans people, it was like, oh, look at this like weird person, like what are they doing with their body? So it was really hard for me at first. I was really like in denial of who I was, and I shifted through a lot of different identities before I like settled in and accepted myself as a trans guy. Um, and I feel like honestly that just sort of happened, by watching like YouTube videos and stuff, like, and seeing that there were other people who like were accepted for their identity and could live happily as a transgender person, which is something that I hadn't experienced before. As for the first person that I came out to, I first came out about, my feelings, first of all, before I even came out as transgender, to my 6th grade writing teacher. And, she was very supportive. She really pointed me in the right direction and got me to talk to the school counselor. And that was very helpful, just in realizing the person that I am. And then eventually I came out to my school. I came out to my high school principal, and I got that rolling. So I officially came out in my freshman year, in the beginning of my freshman year of high school.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. One of the things you pointed out was the importance of seeing models of people who had accepted themselves and were living their authentic truths and were okay. And I think it's great that in this day and age we do have communities that don't look the same as communities may have looked in the past, but I think it's so important that those exist and are out there for folks who may be having a hard time finding that support in real life, so to speak. So that's fantastic. So we'll move next to Kyle.
My coming out story was kind of a long one because it took place in several parts, I guess. Because the first part was I was on this online chat group of these people that enjoyed this comic called Homestuck. And yeah, I saw that, Emery. But what happened was they were always very accepting of trans people, and they were very accepting of pronouns, and they always made sure that they gendered people correctly. And in the past, I had always just kind of like never questioned my gender. I mean, I was always kind of like, Mom, why am I such a tomboy? She's like, well, that's how you are, whatever, you're a tomboy. I'm like, alright, whatever. So I just kind of never dressed, quote-unquote, flattering, and got made fun of at school for that. But I didn't care because, whatever, freaking middle school kids. And so this happened when I was in sophomore in high school, when I met these people, and when they asked me my pronouns, I was like, huh, I've never been asked that before, like, ever. And so I decided to be like, hey, maybe you guys should use, like, all pronouns. Like, let's see how that goes. But the thing is, when you say that, people just kind of, like, resort to what they know you as, and so they just kind of refer to me as she pronouns. And I didn't know why, but that bothered me a lot, actually. And I didn't know why. I was like, well, they're calling me by she pronouns, which is what I go by all the time, but now that they give me option, I want more. And so later on I was like, hey guys, you should just use he pronouns, and let's see how that goes. And so after a while I was like, after meeting all those people and meeting people who were different than cisgender, I was like, you know what, I might be genderqueer. And so I was kind of exploring that identity for a while, and realized I wasn't genderqueer, and it turns out I was a trans guy. And because I didn't want to, I was kind of just experimenting with my identity, because I was like, okay, well, I kind of like feminine things, so maybe I'm not totally trans guy. And so I was kind of thinking about that, but I realized, hey, just because I'm a trans guy now doesn't mean I can't like feminine things, and that doesn't change my gender identity. So this process took like 6 months or whatever. I'm just kind of like running around with this stuff. And I hadn't told anyone in my day-to-day life. I've just been talking on the internet with this stuff. And after a while of like kind of solidifying my identity and realizing that I was a trans guy, I kind of tried to be secretive about it a little bit. I cosplayed as different characters from different shows, as in like dressing up with them, Halloween all year round. And so what I did was I bought a binder online that was like cheap, and I was like, yeah. To my family, I was like, yeah, I bought this binder so I could cosplay. That's it. That's why. And so they wouldn't question me about it. And then, but as I came into my identity, I started to realize that like I didn't want to live my day-to-day life as female anymore, and so I started coming out to people all of like 3 years ago, almost, or is it 2? It's 2 years ago. Yeah, in my junior year. And so I was like, hey, so I use these pronouns. Funny story, actually. I'll tell this quick. So I was in a theater tryouts the first time that I came out to my school because I'd met another trans guy. I was like, hey, what's up? And so he kind of gave me the courage because he was out to say, hey, I go by these pronouns. And everyone in the room was very confused because they had never heard this before. It's my first time coming out, but they were really cool about it. And they're like, oh, okay. Sounds good. So that was my kind of like test kind of thing. And then after that, I came out to my closest friends. Ended up losing some friends because I don't know why, but I was friends with some of the Hicks of my town. And they were like, no. And so I was like, okay, bye. And so I wasn't friends with them anymore, and I was just left with the people who actually cared for me and like accepted me, so that was pretty cool. And then next comes the administration. This happens October, around then, right before the second trimester started. I was like, hey, so I went to my school counselor. I was like, hey, so I identify as trans male now, and I'd appreciate if you could help me with my teachers next semester calling me by the right name and pronouns. And so she was like, okay, but to do that we need your parents' permission. And which was dumb because I was not out to my parents. I had no intention of coming out to my parents because I was raised in a very homophobic microaggression towards gay people environment, and when I came up to them as pansexual, they were just kind of like not very cool with that. So coming out as a different gender I didn't think would go down well either. And so I put off doing that because I didn't want to. But after a while, I really wanted to like start the trimester with the teachers calling me by the right name and pronouns, and so my school would kind of take the lead with that. And I ended up coming out to my parents, and they were jerks about it. They didn't accept it, and they just kind of like pushed it under the rug as a phase. And they're like, yes, it's fine. You're just like a tomboy. I'm like, no. And they're still struggling with that to this day, even though it's been 2 years. And they just need to like get over themselves because I'm not changing anytime soon. So I lived out the rest of my high school career as who I was, as a trans male, and been transitioning for like 2.5 years now. And I'm on testosterone now. Wow, I just gave my whole life story. I'm sorry. But yeah, now I'm in college, and it's a good time.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I noticed you also talked about online communities and how, sometimes they're more accepting than the communities that we move through in our day-to-day lives. But I want to switch to Mars to kind of get your story.
Right. Well, I'm 16 and I'm a senior at my high school, and my coming out story begins like way back in the 4th grade when I discovered that I really liked girls a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And, thank goodness, 3 years of torment from my peers, and I told my parents, and they were completely cool with it. And so I have some pretty awesome parents. But it took me, another 5.5 years to come out as non-binary. I use they, them, theirs pronouns. And the first person I came out to was my girlfriend, who is a cisgendered lesbian. And that could have been bad, but she was very accepting, and she was, the easiest person to talk to about my own gender identity. As she still identifies as a lesbian, I still identify as non-binary, and we still love each other very much. My first experience coming out to a large group of people, I attended the Queer Youth Leading the South action camp last summer, and on the forms, I filled them out first with my birth name and my birth gender and my old pronouns, and then afterward I went back through and I said, no, why would I lie about myself in a place I know will be safe? So I went back through and I, went as my authentic self, and while I was at that action camp, I met other non-binary teens and non-binary adults. I met people who were living as themselves in the adult world, and that was life-changing. So when I came back home, I came out to everyone, my entire community, in like one big bang of queerness. So even when people refuse, I still demand to be treated with respect. So in my school, teachers don't use my name or pronouns, but students are slowly starting to. And that's my short, sweet coming out story.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you to all of you for sharing your experiences. I think one of the important things for folks to know is, like, as for everyone, I mean, the process of coming to yourself for everyone, and I think this is true for transgender and gender non-conforming and non-binary youth as well, is individualized. So it's interesting and I think important for us to hear different models of how people go about coming into themselves and working through that process. Some of you already touched on some of the topics I wanted to delve into a little bit more deeply, but we'll go back around and start with you again, Emery, to have you talk a little bit about how you approached the issue of talking about your identity with the different people in your lives, your family versus friends versus people at school, and how things went in each of those different spheres for you.
Yeah, so I feel like by far the people that have been like most easy for me to talk to have been like, for one, like school counselors, but just like my school in general, like when I first came out to my friends, because I had actually come out as like lesbian before I came out as a trans guy, and then like it was sort of different for me because like people didn't originally see me as like a straight girl transitioning to guy. It was like sort of like butch lesbian transitioning into guy, so they had already had like some familiarity with like the LGBTQ community, so I sort of drew upon that, sort of just building on their understanding of the LGBTQ community, and really just talking to them about it. And I feel like it was a lot easier than I anticipated that it was going to be. I was really concerned that it was going to be, like, me coming out as transgender would be this, like, super duper hard concept for them to really fathom, and that, they wouldn't respect me because of it. But I found that, like, about, like, 95% of people that I have come out to have been supportive, while they haven't been, like, completely informed about, like, just, things like gender pronouns and things like names and stuff, like, and it did take them a little bit to really catch on to those things, but, now I have a very solid, like, group of friends who, use the right pronouns for me, who use my correct name, and the few, like, people who have chosen not to respect me in those ways, I have been able to cut out of my life with no problem. And it hasn't really, like, taken anything from me. At least the way that I view it is, like, if someone doesn't, value my identity and doesn't feel that it is necessary to respect me, then I don't want that person in my life. And I have so many other people who are willing to fill that place for me. And, I feel like it sort of went the same way as well with, coming out to, like, teachers and such, because when I, like, started high school and stuff, like, I was still under my birth name, like, on the system, but I talked to my principal beforehand, who had also had like his own personal experiences with like transgender youth. So he already like it was already a topic that was close to his heart because he had people who were very close to him who were transgender or gender non-binary, and so it really made that process a lot easier. So I talked to him about it, said, hey, could you send an email out saying, like, I go by Emery, I go by male pronouns, and, he took care of that, and it was, like, a lot easier, just sort of approaching it from the beginning of freshman year. So I was able to, like, get everything taken care of in terms of, like, bathroom usage, locker rooms, things like that. And as for family, it's still something that I'm working through. Like, I feel like for a lot of people, the family piece is really, like, what's, like, the most bothersome thing because, like, when you go to school, at least, people can say, oh, I have graduation to look forward to, but with your family, it's, like, they're there, hopefully, for, like, your entire life. And it's been a lot more difficult to traverse just that, and getting them to understand those things. But it's still a work in progress for me, and I'm still proud of the place that I am right now.
Great, thank you. And Kyle, you kind of touched on some of this. You anticipated some of my questions, and so you've touched on your family not being particularly supportive, and you talked a little bit about how you approach the situation at school. But I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how things have gone at school and with your friends, and to the extent that you want to fill in anything as far as on the family front.
Like now? Like friends at school now?
Sure. So you're in college now. I believe you started the process of coming out of school when you were still in high school. So if it would be good, I guess, to have a compare and contrast about how folks in high school were versus how things have been for you since you started college. I believe this fall.
Okay, so little comparison. So, I lived in a small town. So in Minnesota, you're like, all right, Minnesota, progressive, right? That's in some places, but in other places, they're like, we're from Texas. We're gonna fake Texan accents, and we're gonna hit you with the Bible. And so, as I was going through this process, many people in my school were absolutely not accepting. They didn't use my correct pronouns. They didn't use my name, and they they absolutely made sure to use my name and wrong pronouns as much as they could around me because they were jerks. My close group of queer friends, the small percentage in this large straight world in that school, were pretty cool. They were very supportive. I was the leader of the GSA at that time, and so we all kind of chilled and just, yeah, it was a good time. But now in college, because of what I went through in high school, I came into college just presenting not as trans, and so no one knew that I was trans, and I still went to the queer groups and all that, but I just went as a gay man. And as I went on, as I collected my group of queer friends, and they were just talking about their experiences with gender and all that stuff, I just felt like kind of slightly left out. I know I did this to myself, I'm fully aware of that, but I just really wanted to kind of be in on that conversation, because if someone would be like, oh yeah, when I had long hair, like it would get really messy and all that stuff, and I wanted to be like, oh my gosh, same. But yeah. So in the end, about a month ago, which was about 3 months into college, I started slowly coming out to my group of friends, and they've been all really cool about it. And so I've just been like, hey, plot twist, turns out I'm a trans man. And they're like, whoa, and I was like, yeah. So that was really nice. And I haven't come out to anyone that isn't my friend because I didn't want to. So I didn't. But what sucks is that I recently went to a Minnesota Out conference, and I was talking about my experiences there as just a general thing, and there's some people that it wasn't out to came to the conference with me, and I kind of want to keep my not out status to only my friends. I mean, I want to keep my out status to my friends. And so anyone that was coming with me to the conference, I was like, hey, please don't tell anyone. There's this one guy that came that I didn't really want to tell, but I also, if he heard something, I didn't want to actually have him talk about it. And so I was like, hey, by the way, I don't know if you heard this, but I'm a trans man, but don't tell anyone. And he was like, oh, you're a trans guy? I'm like, dang it, I didn't even have to tell you. But then he went and said something transphobic to me, so I was pretty sad about that. That was recently, but my friends have figuratively beat him up, and now we're like, okay, bye. And so that's been my experience at college. My roommate is genderqueer, and we get along just fine. And we wanted to room together because we're like, hey, queer people, am I right? So it's been a good time.
Great. I'm glad that you've been able to find a somewhat more supportive environment in college. So Mars, we'll turn it to you. Kind of the same question. Fill in as you see fit based on what you shared for the first question in terms of how things have gone in the different kind of areas of your life. You know, how your family has been, how things has been at school, and your friends, community members, any experiences that you think are particularly important.
Well, I've had some wildly different experiences from group to group. Amongst my friends, it's been very smooth because, South Georgia, the queer kids tend to flock together like rainbow sheeps of their family. And I actually started the GSA at my school this year, and I'm the president, so it's a lot easier for us to flock together. And actually, when I started the club, I at a first meeting introduced myself as Mars and started the practice of introducing your pronouns at the same time as your name in our space. So it's been very smooth there. At school in general, I've told some of the or accepting teachers about my name, and they don't use it. My pronouns, they don't use them. My peers who aren't my friends can be very disrespectful sometimes. My friends always there to defend me, but even before I came out as non-binary, everyone perceived me as a lesbian, which was weird because I'm actually pan, but everyone thought I was a lesbian. And so even before I came out as non-binary, there were a lot of F slurs, Q slurs, D slurs, all the fun ones. Within my community, like all of South Georgia, it's been very interesting because there have been some of the Bible thumping, you're going to hell type responses, but a lot of the Christian community around here has been very accepting and actually got a lot of outreach from the Unitarian Universalist Church in Valdosta, and actually spoke at their Interfaith Pride service this summer. So there's been a lot of mixed religious response too. And yeah, like in my professional life too, I had an unpaid and then a paid internship, and when I came out, everyone they're from all over the place. We have some people from Canada. Most of them are from New Jersey, but they were all super super duper accepting, and so that's been nice. Now,
Great. I think you cut out, at least on my end, for the last little bit there, but I think you were just saying that's been your experience. I think those are the last few words you said, but I just wanted to make sure that we didn't miss any of the last part of what you said.
Well, I am a senior, and I'm about to, start going to college, and my top two universities both have very good LGBT services. So I'm going to see about housing and restrooms, so I'm very excited.
Awesome, fantastic. I lived in Minnesota for many years, and I have family in Valdosta, Georgia. So this has been enlightening for me because in my mind, Minnesota is like, at least the Twin Cities where I lived, very progressive. And I always thought, oh, Valdosta, oh, not very progressive. But here we have, you who live in that area and have found, especially in religious quarters, folks who have been fairly accepting. So that's opened my eyes a little bit. Whereas, how
Now there has been a lot of religious backlash as well, especially not just to me but to the GSA. But there has been some outreach as well.
Yeah, well, that's great to hear. Not the religious backlash, but that there are some people who are actually living their religion in a true way and being accepting. Um, I had another thought, but it escapes me now. I forgot what it was. But I wanted to also kind of give you all a chance, to the extent you're comfortable, to give a shout out to any particular people in your lives who have been very helpful or supportive, just to say, maybe briefly how they've been supportive of you. And so I guess we can circle back to Emery, and if there's anyone, you don't have to say them by name if you don't want to, but if you're free to do that as well, if you think they'll be comfortable with being kind of highlighted.
Well, I guess I'm gonna be representing GLSEN right now. So I want to give a shout out to the GLSEN NSC because which stands for GLSEN National Student Council. Just because the community that I've found there, I feel like has really helped me come into myself and really, be able to bring that person out to the world. And, really just give a big shout out to GLSEN in general because I feel like, if I was not involved with GLSEN, it would have been a lot harder for me to really be myself and just, live authentically. And, GLSEN was sort of the first, time that I felt like I had, my own little, queer community. So I'm just really grateful to have had, my opportunities with GLSEN and to meet all of the wonderful individuals that I've gotten to meet.
Great, thank you. Yes, GLSEN is a fantastic organization, and we're obviously partnering with them for this, but we meaning Lambda Legal, we've partnered with them on many other projects, including kind of the annual Day of Silence, that they do a lot of support for. We do some legal support with them for that annual event, and they do a lot of support for GSAs generally, and shout out to both Kyle and Mars, who both apparently started GSAs at your school, so that's awesome. And Kyle, again, same question for you, if there's any person or persons that you want to kind of highlight as being particularly supportive of you during your process.
I'd like to shout out to my friends Lisa and Leanne, who are sisters, and I've been friends with them for about 7 years now, ever since I was in 6th grade. And I'd like to mention that I'm 18 because I literally haven't said that throughout this entire thing. But yeah, I'm 18. And they actually came with me to my college and are now here and supporting me through the times as well. So they've been super supportive of me, and super cool to be with them. And I'd like to give a little shout out to Demoya here. Demoya here has helped me a lot with my school being jerks and just supporting me in general, and having someone to talk to about my experiences is super cool. So shout out to Demoya.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you, Kyle. It certainly has been great to work with you and all the other young people that I've been able to work with at Lambda Legal. You all are very inspiring to me, and it was through that work that we decided at Lambda Legal we need a platform to give young people a voice. Because, as lawyers and advocates, we're talking about these issues all the time, but I think it's even more powerful to have the actual young people living in these experiences and who, as you all know, are actually doing most of the advocacy on your own, day in and day out. I mean, we swoop in and we will write a letter, or we'll, file a lawsuit if that's called for, but it's a day in, day out experience for you all. So I myself and my colleagues at Lambda and the folks at GLSEN thought it was very important to give you a platform to share some of your individual experiences. And we know that your experiences aren't universal. They aren't necessarily representative of every trans or gender nonconforming or non-binary student's experience, but there are some common themes. And so thank you all again for participating, and thank you, Kyle, for the shout out. And Mars, wanted to use the same opportunity in case you wanted to highlight anyone that's been particularly helpful for you.
I'd like to shout out to my girlfriend Sophie, who's the president of her school's GSA, who, has been supporting me from afar for, since I met her and since before I came out, and she's, she'll bear with me as long as it takes for me to explore my own identity, and after that too. And to the staff of the Queer Youth Leading the South Action Camp, who I know I'm going to keep mentioning that camp because it changed my life, but Foster, Noon, they really opened my eyes to how it's okay to be non-binary, really influenced my fashion sense, gave me a lot of confidence, and has seen me cry more times than most people have. And Mustafa Sullivan, who was also at the camp, and he opened my eyes to a lot of intersections that I never even knew existed.
Fantastic, thank you. Could you say the name of that camp again, because I missed it?
Oh, Queer Youth Leading the South, Quilts.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
It's hosted in a different big southern city every year at a university campus.
Great, that's awesome. So I wanted to give you all a chance to, because I know that there are other young people who may be thinking about their identity, maybe trying to come into themselves, trying to work up the courage to start coming out to folks in their lives, or maybe are in the process of doing that right now, and maybe almost certainly having somewhat of a hard time with it in some way. So wanted to ask each of you if you have any words of advice or anything that you'd like to share with other trans or non-binary or gender non-conforming young people who may be watching or listening to this program. And we'll start with you again, Emery.
Yeah, I guess my piece of advice is more towards like just dealing with the whole like coming out process. Just realizing that it's okay to not be out like at this time, or really, ever, like if that's what you want to do. I guess like just realizing that like coming out is something that you do at your own pace. And it's really, it's okay to like experiment with your identity and really like, just spend time in like that gray area where you may not know exactly like, what your identity is. And realizing, that might not even be stagnant your entire life. But especially like in those moments when you're not out, like whether it's at all or if it's in like a particular aspect in your life, whether it's like family or friends, I feel like it's very important to find community. And I know that in some places it is very hard to find community, locally, as in like, not every school has a GSA, and even if they do, like maybe, it's not really safe to meet. Just things like that. Like, there's definitely like online things. Like I know before I came out at school, like I didn't know like any trans people. Like the first ever trans person that I met was actually like through GLSEN, and my time like just being a student ambassador with GLSEN. And before then, it was very isolating and very alienating to not really like be able to find myself in, my peers. But, especially avenues like YouTube, I love YouTube, first of all. But YouTube has been very, impactful for me. And even, just joining like online communities, like Kyle said, I feel like that's very important as well. And realizing, you might not have access to like resources right now, like immediately available to you. But, there are other, like, ways to get in touch with people, and it's very important to realize, like, there's sort of, like, a life outside of, like, the bubble that you might live in at the current moment. And it's just a matter of finding ways to reach out to other people and really just, find a place where you can be, like, yourself and you can be respected, even if it's just with, like, one group of people.
Great, thank you. Very important words. Kyle, do you have any words of advice that you'd like to share with other young people?
I'd like, okay, so before coming out, like I said, I had a lot of friends, but after coming out, I had not as many friends as that. And I want people to know that sometimes it feels, well, it actually does feel bad when your friends don't respect you. And sometimes you have to make the decision to cut them out of your life because you deserve better than people who don't respect who you are and are nice to you in that way. And it's really hard to do, but sometimes you have to do it. I've had to do it several times. But I want you to know that, like, maybe you're in high school and you really don't like it, but if you plan on going to college or moving away somewhere, it's generally better because in high school, in college, no one really cares. Not like in the fact or like in a negative way, but no one really views you negatively for being who you are because everyone's just trying to run around figuring out who they are. And there are going to be some people who like don't respect that, but you get to have the option to be around who you want to be around. So I guess my word of advice is keep people around who respect you and your identity is valid as anyone else's. So don't let people try to dictate. And if they do try, just tell them to leave you alone in nice terms.
Thank you, Kyle. And Mars, any words of advice that you have for other young people?
Yes. Just remember that while coming out of any closet is an act of bravery, you're not cowardly to, remain closeted to others or even yourself. It's, queer existence is brave. In a, cis heteronormative world, your existence is brave. You don't have to show your bravery by coming out before you're ready or to people who you know won't accept you.
That's fantastic. I think that's good advice for some people of any age. Everything that you all have said is just, I think, very, very important advice for people of any age. So thank you so much for sharing those wise words. Wanted to give you all a chance to, if you have an example, if you don't, that's fine, but if there's any particular experience that you've had on your own personal journey that was particularly uplifting for you that you'd like to share. And to mix it up, we'll start with you, Mars.
Oh.
Sorry, I didn't give you time to
see. Okay. Let's see, an uplifting experience for me was coming home from, you guessed it, Queer Youth Leading the South Action Camp, and stepping out of the shuttle and walking, and my mom was waiting in the parking lot, and she had, without me knowing, she had just, called to check in on me with one of the camp staff, and they had referred to me with my preferred name and pronouns, and so she had asked them, if I had come out during camp, and they said yes. So when I came back, and she asked me my name, and I said it's Mars, and then she hugged me and we cried, and on the whole way back home, I just said, all right, it's open question hour, and she just was able to ask me questions about my identity, and she was so understanding the whole time, and like, some people aren't going to find that figure in their mothers. Maybe they'll find it in a teacher or a pastor or, a counselor. But when they find that person, that's going to be the best moment of their life right there.
What a great story. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mars. Kyle, do you have an uplifting moment or experience that you'd like to share with us?
I'm thinking, but I guess one of my uplifting moments was, so little background information. My school fought me on me being able to use the men's bathroom, and they're very rude, and they're very awful people, my school administration. And what happened was, Lambda Legal helped me go and get on a conference call with them, And even though they didn't really budge, it was really nice to tell them in really nice words to like heck off and that they weren't being nice. And having that experience of being able to like talk with them without feeling at a disadvantage and on the equal playing field, and with me being even a little higher than them because they were the ones being mean, was super cool. So like just that conference call and being able to experience telling off transphobe people is kind of cool.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It certainly can be empowering to be able to at least speak your truth and let them know why it is that what they're doing um, isn't right, and just so folks know, there is an active investigation into Kyle's high school related to a complaint that he filed against them with our help. So we're hoping to at least get them to change their ways, so that even though Kyle's not a student anymore, they are other transgender and gender nonconforming and non-binary youth don't have to be disrespected or discriminated against the same way that Kyle was. So thank you for sharing that, Kyle. And we're going in reverse, so my brain scrambled. Emery, you're the last one. Do you have an uplifting experience or story that you'd like to share?
Huh. That's sort of like a couple like small moments, but I guess like biggest sort of moment, once again, GLSEN. So like I guess like just I guess I had a similar experience to Mars in that like when I first like entered like GLSEN as a student ambassador, like on my forums I had put my birth name before, like because I hadn't been out to like absolutely anyone before then. I put my birth name and like female pronouns and stuff like that, like into the forums and stuff, and I was basically gonna go into the program like as like a lesbian like girl, which is really weird for me to say now because I'm just like no, but like so yeah, I was gonna like enter like under that identity, like being perceived in that way, but like sort of like last minute I like we were asked to give like introductions to everybody else like over email, just to introduce ourselves to the rest of the ambassadors that had been chosen. And I was sort of faced with a decision, like, do I want to present myself in a way that is not authentic, or do I want to be the person who I am? And in that moment I was just like, okay. And then I basically just introduced myself as Emery. I said that my preferred pronouns were he, him, and his, and from then on people knew me as like Emery, like in the ambassadors program. And I feel like just that sort of moment of like I feel like that was sort of the moment when I decided that I was going to stop like portraying this other person who just like wasn't who I was. And it was like it was very difficult to make that choice, but like honestly, if I hadn't had done that, like I don't imagine that I would be out right now. Like I find it very difficult to like believe that I would honestly like be out to my school or to anybody at this point if I hadn't made that choice to first come out like to the GLSEN ambassadors, and even just my experiences interacting with them, because like they were sort of the first ever people who like I guess that was my sort of like test, I guess if you want to call it that, just sort of like testing the waters to see like how do people interact with me when they know me as like the person who I genuinely am. And it was the first time like people had actually called me by my correct pronouns and my correct name, and it was sort of the moment that like spurred me on to continue my coming out process and to realize that there were other people out there who would be accepting of me, and overall it was just a very validating experience, and I'm very glad that I had it.
Great, awesome. I think your experience is a testament to the power of being affirmed and having a safe space to kind of come into oneself and be able to have that space really to to decide for yourself or discover for yourself who you actually are. So thank you for sharing that with us. So I wanted to also give you all a chance to, I asked you if you had any words of advice for other trans and gender nonconforming and non-binary students, but I also wanted to make sure you had a chance if you had any thoughts or anything you think it's important for other people to know, whether it's parents or school administrators or other students who aren't trans or gender nonconforming or non-binary. Anything that you think it's important for them to know in thinking about how they should be interacting with and supporting the transgender and gender nonconforming and non-binary students that they live with or come into contact with. And I guess we'll start with Emery. Do you want to start, or do you want some time?
Can I have a bit of time?
Sure. Kyle, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'll start. So, what was the question?
The question is, do you have anything that you think is important for other people to know about interacting with people and supporting young people who are transgender or gender nonconforming or gender non-binary?
Okay, yeah. All right, so my first thing, well, I don't know if I have anything, but that thing is that you may not know what it's like to be transgender because maybe you've known yourself as cisgender your whole life, but it doesn't mean that you can't try to understand what the other person is going through, because that experience that they're going through is different than yours, but just because it's different doesn't mean it's not valid. And doing everything you can to respect that person and helping them, because they're not always there to correct other people's pronouns, and you kind of have to be the one to help with that, because if you're around someone and someone's not using their right pronouns, then you have to kind of help them, because it's a tough world out there for people who use different pronouns, from she and her especially, because people want to throw that out that, well, it's not grammatically correct, even though we use it singularly every day of our lives, but whatever. But you gotta help these people out and do the best you can to be an ally and make ally a verb and not just a noun.
Fantastic, thank you. Mars, any words of advice for people generally?
Yes. I think this one might be a bit obvious, but when you see it happen again and again, so I'm just gotta say it. Don't ask about our bits.
Yeah.
Just don't ask us about our bits. They're not your bits. They're not your partner's bits. They're not bits that need to be on your mind. You're not going to accomplish anything by asking, especially a trans youth, about their bits. You're not going to accomplish anything for us or for yourself. You're only making us uncomfortable and possibly putting us in danger. So don't ask about our bits.
Very, very important words. I don't know why people think they have a right to ask invasive and awkward and ridiculous questions that they would never ask someone who's cisgender, but they meet a transgender or non-binary person, and all of a sudden it's socially acceptable, people think, to start talking about really impolite things that can actually put people in danger. So thank you for raising that.
And don't ask people about the surgery or the therapy or the anything, because not everyone's trans experience is going to be the same. Not every trans person wants bottom surgery. Not every trans person wants top surgery. Not every trans person wants any kind of bit change. Sometimes we just are. So if you're trying to make your ally into a verb, that's one thing you can definitely change from your behavior. No bits.
Point. Very important point. Thank you for raising that. And so we'll come back around to Emery. You've had some time to think, so let us know what your words of wisdom are.
Yeah, just to shout out to Mars, because I feel like that's very important for people to know. Like, do not ask about our quote-unquote bits. So I guess my sort of advice that I would give to, specifically people who are trying to be like allies to like transgender people and gender non-conforming people and non-binary people, all the people, is really just, it relates to that whole idea of like ally, like an ally, calling yourself an ally, it isn't a noun, it's like a verb. It's like, a whole emphasis on action comes with calling yourself an ally. And really just realizing that like when somebody comes out to you, like just like a very important step, like after they come out to you is realizing, they just shared something like very personal with you about themselves. And you can't really leave the conversation at like, oh, like you told me that you're trans, cool, that's fine, and then like go on like disrespecting their pronouns and their name. It's not that simple as saying like, oh, like I tolerate your existence. Like you actually do have to put in work into like supporting that person, and really have to get in the habit of like making it a point to start the conversation about, simply asking like, what can I do to make you comfortable? And I feel like, especially like in my personal life, like I haven't had as many like overtly transphobic experiences. I feel like more often than not I receive like a lot of like people, sort of like perpetuating these microaggressions against me, and that's what really, sort of impacts me on my day-to-day life, which deals with a lot of things like asking invasive questions or just making like really rude comments that people might not realize are problematic. So really just, taking the time to really talk to each individual like person who comes out to you, and just, opening up the avenue for conversation, because like it can be very hard for like queer people in general to advocate that for themselves. It's hard enough sort of saying like I'm queer in the first place, but even just like it can be very hard like in a society that like does not place that responsibility on individuals, like to really raise your hand and be like, hey, like I'm uncomfortable with this. Like, so I guess just making it a point to really reach out, talk to like the person in your life who's come out to you, and just, anybody really, just ask them, how can I make you more comfortable? Go from there and really try to educate yourself, because, that's very important, and I'm sure the person will appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you to all of you for your very important and instructive insights and input on this and all the topics we've talked about this evening. We are right about the hour mark, so unfortunately we have to shut it down now, but I want to thank you guys so much for being willing to share experiences. I know it's a brave thing to ask. It's a big thing to ask, especially young people who are trans or gender nonconforming or non-binary, or who, break with convention in this way, in any way, to put themselves out there and to put their stories out there. So I just want to acknowledge that that's a big deal, and so thank you all for being willing to do it. I want to also thank all the people who have tuned in. I do think it's so important for us to raise up the voices of young people like yourselves, and I hope that all the young people who have tuned in and everyone else who have tuned in have learned something. For the young people who are out there who have had similar experiences, I hope that they are somewhat empowered, feel like they can advocate for themselves and can reach out for help if they need it. And for everyone else, I hope you learned something about the importance of supporting trans and gender nonconforming and non-binary and all of our young people, whether they go to the same school as you, whether they're someone related to you, whether they're someone in the community. It's important that we make sure that we make all of these environments equitable and supportive for all young people. So thank you all again. You're all amazing and inspiring. And not just to other young people, but to advocates like me who are trying to make schools and homes and communities safer for everybody. So yeah, I encourage any young person who's listening to this who has questions or who would like assistance advocating for themselves or educating the people around them to reach out for help. I mean, you could reach out to GLSEN, you can reach out to Lambda Legal, you can reach out to any of the other organizations who are doing this work. You can reach out to people in your community who have signaled that they're supportive about this. And if you want somewhere online to start looking for help, you can go to GLSEN's website, that's glsen.org, or Lambda Legal's website, which is lambdalegal.org. And please, above all, just know that you're not alone, and that help and support is out there. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us. Thanks again to our participants, and have a good night. This is the end of our conversation. Night, everybody.
Night.